Hi there, this is Bruno from Spainguru.es, and this is the Spanish Non-Lucrative Visa webinar. Today is Wednesday, November the 19th, 2025. The way this webinar is structured, we're going to talk about before the application, during the application, after the approval, going through definitions, how consulates work, different immigration status, tax considerations, and then we're going to go through the eligibility criteria and documentation requirements. Then we're going to look at the timing and application process for this visa type and how you arrive to Spain, renewal process, long-term residency, even going for Spanish citizenship and transition to work permits, the most common pathways. The content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulate requirements. Now, first, a little bit about Spainguru. Our objective is facilitating the relocation process for the English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. We have great reviews online. You can find 190 five-star reviews on Trustpilot, excellent reviews on Google, so you are in pretty good hands. You can use Spainguru.es for absolutely free. You can join our free weekly newsletter that I send every Monday to 15,000 readers. Watch our YouTube channel with 7,400 subscribers and more than 1,000 videos. Out of them, 500 videos about the non-lucrative visa. A blog with more than 2,000 articles, and of course, a huge community with an aggregated total of 150,000 plus members, from which one of the most important group, and the most important group about the Spanish non-lucrative visa, is from Spainguru, 26,000 members that I highly recommend you joining today. Here's the link for the group. It is highly active and it's wonderful to understand about first-hand experiences, asking questions about the process, and so much more. Other things that you can use on Spainguru.es for free. If you go to Spainguru.es, you will find here a Move to Spain checklist and more webinars, total 7 webinars, as I mentioned, the weekly newsletter, and a destinations section. The Move to Spain checklist section is highly relevant. If you're planning to move to Spain, you can have here a clear step-by-step project about moving to Spain, starting as far as 1 year before your intended move to Spain. And it goes all the way even after you arrive to Spain with all the steps, with videos, with articles, with experts who can help you along the way so you don't forget anything. So really, really interesting, and of course, for free. And here's the destinations section. Here you can read about 13 different places that I think cover 95% of where expats move in Spain. And the cool thing about this is that it is updated on real time because it links you to websites like WeatherSpark for climate, Numbeo for the cost of living, Idealista for rentals and buying property. And it gives you, of course, that information on real time. So Spainguru.es, pretty interesting. And here you can join the community with all the groups, Facebook groups, Reddit groups, and here the newsletter. So yeah, and for the visa guides, you have, of course, a big non-lucrative visa guide. And here you can find all the non-lucrative visa consulates, like for example, UK consulates. And here on each of the consulates, you can read about first-hand experiences, right? So for example, if you go to Los Angeles here, not only you have the links to the official pages for the consulates, and if they work with BLS, you're going to find the official links from here. But also here I upload real stories, first-hand experiences of people applying from that specific consulate. As you probably know, each consulate is its own kingdom, so it's really, really important to be updated about everything related to your specific consulate. That's very important in my opinion. So all that you can use for free. Of course, if you need to use professional experts, and I highly recommend you at least engaging with immigration experts, consulting for an hour, tax advisors consulting with an hour before taking the decision to move to Spain, it is highly, highly, highly recommendable. Then also you have other services that you can find on Spainguru.es, okay? If you go here to Spainguru, either you press this Get Expert Help or Services. Here in Services, you can find the lawyers for immigration, sworn translators for your visa applications, apostille services in the US, UK. Then for your TA paperwork, once you are in Spain, if you're Puerto Rican, specific lawyers for that case, health insurance for Spanish visas, tax advice for Spain filings and US filings as well as financial services. Very interesting as well. All these experts have been personally vetted by me, and I have been recommending them over the years. So you can find all this information like international moving quotes, parcel shipping with discounts, learning Spanish for adults, and all that. So yes, enough about Spainguru. It is a wonderful tool. In my humble opinion, it is absolutely free. And of course, if you engage with any of the listed professionals, I will receive a commission. Of course, this is how we pay the bills here, but definitely I'm not recommending you just to go with my immigration experts and tax experts. In general, that you engage with the ones you choose, at least with those two, at least have a 1-hour consultation just to make sure that your move to Spain is perfectly aligned to your goals. Now, let's go with the non-lucrative visa. What is the Spanish non-lucrative visa? It's a Spanish visa for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves and who don't need to work in Spain. It is defined by two laws. One big main law called Ley Orgánica 4/2000, and the regulation of that law that is called also the Reglamento de Extranjería, which is lower in hierarchy. This is important because it has deep implications. Later on, we're going to see what those implications are. The important thing is that the regulation of the law, that is the bylaw, the smaller in hierarchy law, has changed and took effect, those changes on May 20th, 2025. Okay? Now, let's talk about consulate in these 4 countries, USA, UK, Canada, and Australia. So we mentioned before, you can find a dedicated page for each of the Spanish consulates in those 4 countries. Now, it's important to understand that for this visa, you can't apply from within Spain unless you're already holding a Spanish residency and you are wanting to transition to that non-lucrative residency. If you're applying for the first time, you have to do it from abroad, but not from any consulate. There's 2 options. First, you're a legal resident within the area or jurisdiction that a specific Spanish consulate serves. For example, if you're living in Atlanta, the area that the Miami consulate serves covers Atlanta. Therefore, if you prove you're a legal resident in Atlanta, you can apply from Miami consulate. Second thing to have into account is that many consulates, for instance, all the consulates in the UK and most in the US, use an outsourcing service called BLS, which is an Indian company that they use for the processing or the initial processing of this visa. So in case they work with this outsourced service, you will be dealing with BLS, not with the consulate directly. The third thing to have into account is that if you're a dual passport holder, for example, you're American, but you're also Mexican, you potentially have the possibility to apply from a Spanish consulate in Mexico instead from the consulate in the US. Okay, and this can bring certain advantages, especially if you're going to apply for Spanish citizenship via the fast track later on. Now, if you want to find the dedicated pages for Spaingurus, for the Spanish consulates abroad, you can go to spainguru.es/Spanish non-lucrative visa, or just search on the menu as I just showed you. This is where you find it. We mentioned that BLS is an Indian company, that is a huge company listed in the Indian Stock Exchange, and this is what most consulates use for the initial processing of this visa. For example, UK, they use all of them, the 3 consulates, BLS International. In the USA, you have Miami, you have Washington, Chicago, Houston, San Francisco, Los Angeles. But I believe like New York still doesn't use excuse me, New York doesn't use still BLS for the processing of the non-lucrative visa. So always check whether you will have to deal with them. Another consideration, because we're going to talk and mention about this Schengen area later on. The Schengen area is a group of 29 European countries, okay? And the important thing is that they are internally borderless. So there's only immigration control once you come from outside of this area and you enter it. Now, once you are inside, usually there's not going to be immigration control. That also has implications for your arrival in Spain. We're going to talk later on. Now, let's go into certain considerations about the immigration status. If you enter the Schengen area as a tourist, okay, you are, depending on which passport you hold, you may need a Schengen visa or not, okay? If, for example, you hold a Filipino passport, you will need a Schengen visa to enter the Schengen area as a tourist. Now, as a British, as an American, Canadian, Australian, many more countries, you don't need a visa to enter as a tourist within the Schengen area. Now you can maximum be 90 days in a 180-day rolling period within this area. Then you have to leave, okay, and gain more days if you want to come back. Now, if you want to stay more than 90 days in any of the member countries of the Schengen area, for example, Spain, you will need to get a residency. And how you obtain a residency? Well, via a visa that gives you the right to obtain a residency linked to that visa. What is the difference between visa and residency? The visa is obtained at a Spanish consulate and it's a piece of paper that has a certain validity that lets you enter Spain during that validity period and then grants you the right to obtain a residency linked to it. And once you obtain the residency, the visa itself on your passport expires. For example, you obtain your non-lucrative visa on your passport, you enter Spain, and then once you are in Spain, your non-lucrative residency starts. Okay? So that's the difference. Now, visas or residencies that are valid from 90 days to 5 years are considered to be temporary visas. And after 5 years, visas of more than 5 years is the long-term residency. Okay? This is why the non-lucrative visa or non-lucrative residency is considered to be a temporary visa or temporary residency. Now, it's important. If you're holder of an European Union passport or associate countries, you don't need to apply for this type of visa, okay? As a European Union member, you can, a citizen, you have the right to obtain residency in any of the European member countries, same as their spouses, okay? The spouses can piggyback the residency status of their European Union spouse, okay? And they get better, let's say, residency status in terms of they don't need to show so many financial requirements. You get work permit from the moment in which you move to Spain. You don't have to renew in between those 5 years. You get a 5-year residency period. So therefore, if you have the possibility to obtain a European passport or you're married to someone who can obtain it, this is the easiest path to go. Now, if you're a non-EU national, then the non-lucrative visa is one of the pathways for non-EU nationals, but of course they have a little more stringent eligibility criteria. Now let's go to taxes, okay? The most important concept about Spanish taxes is tax residency in Spain. What happens when you become a tax resident in Spain? Then you will be liable to pay taxes to Spanish authorities on your worldwide income and potentially on the net value of your assets, okay? Generally, how do you become a Spanish tax resident? If you spend, first condition, okay, and it could be any of these conditions, okay? So the first one is, and the most common one, if you spend over 183 days physically in Spain within a calendar year, starting from January 1st to December 31st, those days don't need to be consecutive, and it doesn't matter which immigration status you have. Therefore, days in Spain as a tourist will count, okay? So if you come at the beginning of the year as a tourist, and then you get a visa later on, and you come back later on during the year, those days as tourists had to be added towards your Spanish tax residency. So always calculate well. 1 minute in Spanish soil counts as a day, okay, for tax residency in Spain. Second condition, if your main income comes from Spain. And third condition, if your family lives in Spain. Let's talk a little bit about taxes very quickly. There's the income tax, okay, that you pay annually on June 30th with progressive tax rates that range from 19% to 47%. There's regional variations, okay? And then there is also, once you become a Spanish tax resident, you need to disclose the value of your assets and rights held abroad of Spain, okay? For example, if you have bank accounts, real estate properties, cryptocurrency, etc., by category, if any of the category is over 50,000 euros, you need to declare everything in that category. For example, 2 bank accounts of 25,000 euros, total 50,000 euros by the bank account category, you need to disclose the existence of those 2 bank accounts. Then, regional wealth tax. Okay, depending where you move in Spain, you could potentially be liable for paying taxes on your net worth. Okay, there are allowances, deductions, and there's different thresholds depending on the regions. Madrid and Andalusia are the most favorable ones. Catalonia is the least favorable one. Okay, then there is the solidarity tax, which is a nationwide wealth tax that kicks in at a 3 million threshold, much higher, okay, with allowances, so more 3.7 if you added it. And but it doesn't matter where you move in Spain. It can also, you could become liable if you're over the threshold of your net worth, okay? Then remember that Spain has many double taxation agreements, including with the USA, UK, Canada, Australia, etc., that will avoid you from paying twice on the same thing, okay? Therefore, if you pay taxes in Spain for a specific thing, for example, employment income, and if you're liable in your home country for that income, whatever you pay to Spain, you can credit it towards your taxes in your home country. Therefore, you will end up paying zero, just filing taxes. This is more or less how it works, and it's especially applicable to Americans, which, as you probably know, if you're an American passport holder, you always have to file taxes and pay taxes in the States, okay, regardless if you're a USA tax resident or not. Just by holding the passport, you will be liable for that. Remember that you can join my Spanish Taxes Overview webinar every 15 days. Next one is on November 25th, 12 p.m. You always get a recording once, if you're registered, I send it to your email that you can watch later on. But if you join, of course, you have the Q&A session that you can ask questions anytime. Now, let's talk about the non-lucrative visa after we went through these initial considerations, okay, that are very, very linked to the non-lucrative visa. Let's talk about the documentation. This is a summarized list. Always check the documentations in your consulate in English, in Spanish, the BLS office, if they work with BLS website, okay? And talk or read the first-hand experience of people applying from those locations, because they can have even extra requirements that are written nowhere. This also happens, unfortunately. First, address in Spain. They will ask you, where are you moving in Spain? Now, it will depend how strict they are with this requirement. Some consulates are happy that you just mentioned the province in Spain where you're moving without any more questions. Some consulates, like, for example, Boston or Chicago or Houston, they will ask you to provide a rental contract of at least 3 months rent, okay? Now, I have interviewed lawyers who said that this requirement is absolutely bonkers, that you shouldn't comply, but most people decide to comply because they don't want to have extra friction in their application. So maybe sometimes they mitigate this by renting an Airbnb for 3 months, okay? Then maybe once they are accepted, they reduce the rental on their Airbnb, to shorter time, okay? Or they cancel it all the way, really, like, not going a little bit against the interest of the landlord, okay, who blocked the calendar for you. But yes, I hear that people do this. And also yesterday I was reading an applicant from New Delhi Embassy that, for the first time I read this, the consulate in New Delhi called the Airbnb landlord to check whether the rental was real. Okay, so that can also happen. Okay, Airbnb has a way to extract a certificate for visa applications. I have a video about that if you want to have the link, or just search on Spainguru's YouTube channel. Just search Spainguru Airbnb visa application certificate, and the video will come up for you. Now, addressing country of residencies. You need to prove that you can apply from a certain Spanish consulate, and by that you need to prove, for example, you need to show the driving license saying that you live, for example, next to Los Angeles, okay, so that you are applying from Los Angeles consulate / BLS office, right? Or, for example, in the UK, they don't have this, so you prove it by showing the bank account that says your name and a certain address within the jurisdiction of London Consulate or Manchester or Edinburgh, right? Or people use also utility bills or anything that can prove their address. Okay, so depending on the country, there's different means of proof. Now, prove sufficient financial means to support yourself, and if you're moving with dependents as well, okay? The financial threshold goes up every dependent that you are bringing, okay? And, of course, without working. It has to be passive income or savings, right? Or access to certain, or access to liquid funds, yes? Have comprehensive health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain, okay? So private health insurance with certain conditions. Or if you are a UK retiree, you could potentially instead use the S1 form, start the process in the UK, and complete it once you're in Spain. That will grant you access to the public healthcare system in Spain, okay? Also, you will have to show a clean criminal background check, medical certificate, which is not related to the health insurance, This is a one-page document that a doctor has to sign and stamp, stating that you don't have infectious diseases. Spouses, if you're bringing spouses, then you will have to provide a new copy of the marriage certificate with a certain validity period. If you're bringing dependent children, you will have to bring new birth certificates proving that they are your children. But if you're not bringing any of these, then of course you don't have to provide the certificates. Not engage in any work or professional activities in Spain. Sometimes, and more often, consulate will ask you to write a letter of intent in which you state and swear that you're done planning, you're not working, you're not planning to work in Spain once you get your non-lucrative visa, okay? And also the letter of intent, sometimes is a requirement, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's useful to write a letter of intent to explain in general your case, especially if it's not a straightforward case, right? Like explaining your finances, explaining the situation, explaining everything, right? So this is also another thing. And also, if you're moving with families, certain consulates will ask for school enrollments. Okay, this is the case of Houston. We've seen it in Houston as well. And then they will ask for photos. Usually you take the photos at the BLS office. They will charge for it, of course. You have to pay fees, okay? Every applicant has to pay their own fees, fill certain forms, okay, etc., etc. Now, if you want to listen to the most common frequently asked questions, 43 FAQs, answered by Ainhoa Manero from Sterna Abogados, expert immigration lawyer. Just go on Spainguru.es and search for NLV FAQs. You have 2 videos of 20 minutes each, and it will be really, really interesting, in my opinion, that you also hear her opinions on each of those questions. Now, let's go deeper into these criteria or documentation. Let's start by probably the most important one, the financial requirements, how much money you need to apply for the non-lucrative visa. And in 2025, the financial threshold is always based on the IPREM index, okay? You need for the main applicant 400% of this index, and for each dependent, including spouse, 100% of the IPREM. Translated to euros, main applicant 28,800 euros, and for each dependent 7,200 euros. So if you're applying as a couple, it's 36,000 euros. You can prove that you are over this threshold by showing enough savings or enough passive income like pension withdrawals, potentially rental income. Be careful with that one because it's not very sure income for certain consulates and certain provinces will renew. Dividends or funds available by credit card, if you prove that they are liquid, if you prove that you can access them anytime without penalties, okay, that can also be used. Or it can be a combination of both, a combination of passive income and savings, right? The value of a property doesn't count. You need to sell it if you need it to count towards the financial threshold. Now, how do you prove that you have that money or access to the money? Okay, via showing bank statements and recently also more documentation and certificates from the banks that hold the money or receiving the passive income. Okay, depending on the consulate, they will ask you for 3 months bank statements, 6 months, 12 months, you name it. Some consulate will also ask you for tax returns. For example, in the UK, they don't, but in the US, it's quite common that they ask you for tax returns. Depending on the consulate and in your situation, they may ask for even several years of tax returns. Now, something that you need to have in mind is that potentially you will need to show double the amount of the initial application for the renewal of the visa. The first renewal will happen 1 year after you have entered Spain during the visa validity period. Okay, so in certain provinces, many of them will ask you to have or to show that you have double the amount in a period of 2 years. Okay, certain provinces will only ask you to have 1 year. Okay, case today that can change anytime is Madrid, Valencia province, Murcia, Almeria. People report having had to show only 1 year for the renewal. But for example, Alicante province, they're asking for 2 years. So depending where you're living, they will have different criteria. And supposedly they're gonna now homogenize this and just make it one single criteria. But we have still to see that. We're gonna talk about renewal use case scenario later on, okay? A specific case on how we calculate it. So these are screenshots that actually, let's say, prove my point, or people from Spainguru's community reporting that depending on the province, they are asking different amount of money. Okay. We mentioned that the financial threshold is based on an index. This IPREM index is an index that is, let's say, renewed every time there's new budget, national budget. Okay. In the last 3 years, this government didn't get enough political agreement to get new national budget, so they just basically copy the previous budget, okay? And the IPREM index stays frozen. As you can see, 2023 went up to 600 euros per month, okay? It always grows, never goes down, and stayed the same in 2024, stay the same in 2025, 600 euros per month, which is 7,200 euros in a year, which is 100% of the IPREM, which is what each dependent needs to show. Multiply that times 4, that is 400%, which is what the main applicant needs to show. Now, be careful, because if there is political agreement, any given year, at the beginning of the year, January, February, March, they will update the national budget, and they probably will take that opportunity to increase the IPREM. If they increase the IPREM, the next time that you need either to apply initially or to renew, the new financial threshold will be based on the new IPREM. Imagine that they raise the IPREM to 650 euros per month, then the main applicant will go to 31.2K, and each dependent 7,800 euros instead. So you have to budget accordingly. We mentioned that not only bank statements are used to prove the financial threshold, but also there's more certificates asked, especially after May 20th, 2025, in many consulates, not in all consulates. For example, Mexico City Consulate, they're still not updated on this. They're not asking any certificate from the bank except for the normal statements. Now, if you are in the UK and in the US, they are usually asking for new certificates. They want to know who you are and your name linked to a specific account. They want to know the account number. You can't cross it with crosses just for privacy or for security. No, you have to show the account number. They want to see a certificate that shows that you are the owner of this account when you did open, and also some certificates and reports from the bank, official banks, showing the balance of that specific account as of December 31st of the previous year, and also average balance, like monthly balance for the previous year as well. Now, many people report that banks in the US, UK, Canada are not used to provide this certificate, and why they ask about these certificates. And also a big discussion in Spainguru's group is that they ask for wet stamps. As you can see there, my bank is BBVA. I have asked this on the phone, and I received this image on the phone with a digital version of this certificate saying that I'm the owner of my account. And you can see that the bank put a stamp there. So it's common in Spain that every paper and certificate you get from your bank has an old-fashioned wet stamp, but this is not happening to banks in many countries. And consulates are accepting this fact in most cases. So I don't hear many people, or any people in fact, have problems because there was not a wet stamp on the certificates, but they do have some problem because of the new requirements of showing the balances, monthly and yearly balance at the end of the year. So because the banks don't provide this information in general. So I have interviewed Ainhoa Manero from Sterna Abogados, and she says that for her clients, basically, she's like doing a calculation using an Excel, then she notarizes it, she gets a legalization for these documents, she writes a letter saying that the bank is not providing this certificate, but you swear that this information is real and true, potentially trying to get a stamp from the bank for this calculation. Depending on the case of the client, they're providing the closest thing they can, and the consulates are just accepting this because they know that in those specific countries they won't get this kind of certificate. So if you want to watch this video, you can search for non-lucrative visa financial requirements Spainguru on Google, and this interview will come out. Now, related to this, another $1 million question is, can I work remotely for non-Spanish companies? Now, something important. Consulates are extremely sensitive to this situation. So if they have the slightest doubt that you are working, and you're not going to stop working in some cases, or you have the plans to work, or you're still active after the visa granting, it's going to be an ipso facto denial. Okay, so the consulates are crazy about this. Okay, they can't have the slightest doubt that you plan to work. Okay. Now, the fact is that there is a gray area. Once you have your non-lucrative visa granted and you are in Spain, if you're working remotely for non-Spanish companies, a lot of people are doing this. Okay, and actually there is a Supreme Court ruling that supports this, and there is no connection between the tax authorities and the immigration authorities in this sense. Therefore, if you have the requirements to renew your non-lucrative residency using passive income or savings, not active income, of course, you will get your visa renewed, okay, even if you're working remotely for non-Spanish companies, because the law, when this visa type was passed, back in the day, there was not such thing as a remote work. So legislators were thinking about that you shouldn't be working in the Spanish market. So for a Spanish company, that is pretty clear, pretty clear. But it is a gray area if you're working remotely outside of Spain. Okay, so that is the situation. This is a big difference between applying from the consulate and being already with a visa, okay, and having the possibility to renew it without using active income. This is a gray area. Now, in 2023, the Spanish authorities released the digital nomad visa, which is probably more accurate figure for this situation, for working remotely, and potentially this is the pathway that you need to go. So I'm not telling you to work under the non-lucrative residency, definitely not, but I'm just stating to you what lawyers say. If you want to know more, you can watch this short video. There's a QR code there, okay, or search this Spainguru. Can I work remotely for non-Spanish companies? And I talk extensively about this. Okay, now we're going to talk later about the also very commonly asked question: should I stop working before applying the non-lucrative visa? We're going to talk about that later on, and also underlining the difference between the consulate, which is wild. Okay, the difference is crazy, but also that certain consulates are officially accepting that you are actively working, okay, and still they grant you the non-lucrative residency. Now, not, of course, all kinds of works or jobs are accepted, but the Edinburgh Consulate, North UK in Scotland, officially lists the possibility to be working in a type of work that, because of their nature, it's accepted. And in this case, a Spainguru community member explained in the group about this, and that all the family got the non-lucrative visa, and the husband was working in an oil platform in the Northern Sea. This husband had to go back every 15 days or every month, work there, and then come back to Spain, and still they got their visa granted. And it's an officially explained in the website. Now, also talking to lawyers, expert lawyers, they said that they have customers who have, for example, they are like pilots, okay, and they need to go back to the States and maybe like work once a month, and they still got a non-lucrative visa. So they generally live in Spain, but they go back to the States to work for 10 days or so, then go back. So that is a situation. And if you're in this situation, doesn't mean you're not get your non-lucrative visa, but of course, always go with legal help. You can find on Spainguru.es my recommended immigration experts who have experience with these cases. Okay, this is what I would list under the non-straightforward cases. So when you don't have a straightforward case, that is namely, if you're not a pensionist or retiree moving to Spain on a non-lucrative visa, usually it's not a straightforward case. Okay, when you don't have a straightforward case, I will generally recommend you at least consult with an expert for an hour just to make sure that everything is fine, your paperwork is fine, okay, everything is well done, okay, prepared for the application, or directly hire them for applying on your behalf. Now, let's talk about the private health insurance requirements. We mentioned that UK retirees have the possibility, instead of a private health insurance, to go with the S1 form. But if you're not in this situation, you will have to get a private health insurance. Now, not all the policies are compliant. In order to be compliant, you have to fulfill all these conditions. First one, no co-payments. Reimbursements, gray area. Depending on the consulate, they're straightforward forbidden. Some consulates, they don't mention it, okay? And it will depend on the officer reviewing your case. Definitely, you are taking a risk if you have reimbursement clauses. Now, no waiting periods. That means you need to be covered from the moment in which you enter Spanish territory. Full coverage with an asterisk. That you need to be covered for anything, okay? Full coverage. This is what the condition said, but we're going to talk about that later on. And generally, 99% of cases, you will have to pay a full year in advance because the health insurance policies or companies require that you pay the full year in advance in order to issue the certificate of coverage in Spanish that has a specific wording. It's a one-page document that is needed and is a requirement for applying for the Spanish non-lucrative visa. Now, let's go with the frequently asked questions. Are my medicines covered? This is common in the States that you get some sort of coverage for your medicines, but in Spain, private health insurances don't pay for your medicines or not cover any part of it. So you have to pay full retail price. Good news are that prices are much lower in Spain than in any other countries that I heard, like US, UK, Canada, etc. What should be the health insurance start date? Now, there's not a single answer to this question, but I would say that generally you need to guesstimate when your visa will be starting. Okay, sometimes they ask you when you want to start your visa a little bit in the future. Okay, leaving some time, and sometimes they will grant you that date in which you ask to have it started. So you need to line up, let's say, the start of your health insurance coverage at the beginning of the same month in which your visa is starting. For example, if you're starting your visa on July 15th, 2026, you have to start your health insurance coverage on July 1st. Okay, that same month, right? So this is generally the mainstream answer. Some people sustain that you need to be covered at the time of the personal appointment at the BLS office. Okay, some people say that. I think it was more in the past that people took this stance on this question, and more people are going to what I'm saying is more mainstream. Now, our health insurance for older than 75 years of age, it is true that not many companies provide coverage for people older than 75, but at least DKV and Adeslas, they have compliant health insurance policies. Okay, and of course, if you go on Spainguru.es, you can find my exclusive Adeslas agent that can provide you a solution until, I think, but I could be wrong, until 84 years old. Are there, what if I have pre-existing conditions? Okay, this is again a nuanced answer, and I'm circling back to the condition of full coverage. According to that condition, you need to be covered for everything, because supposedly it's like if you don't have access to the public healthcare system in Spain, you have to have a policy that mimics, okay, that system, right? So you need to be covered for everything. But most of the people, since many people are senior, they already have pre-existing conditions when they're 60, when they're 70, right? Now, it will depend how serious the pre-existing conditions are that you will be able to obtain a private health insurance that is compliant for the non-lucrative visa, but that they will exclude those pre-existing conditions, okay? So how serious they can be. If you have had cancer, for example, in the last 5 years, unfortunately, it's going to be hard to get private health insurance. That will be the hardest thing in your application to obtain that coverage. Okay, maybe you need to wait until those 5 years have passed. Okay, this is to give you an example. Now, if you have something, let's say, less serious, like high blood pressure, right? What will happen is that the company will give you a non-lucrative visa compliant health insurance policy, but they will exclude that pre-existing condition. Therefore, if you have any problem related to that condition, once you're in Spain, you will have to pay out of your pocket for the treatment and, of course, for the medicines, okay? But still, you will be able to apply for the non-lucrative visa, okay, with a compliant health insurance. So it's a little bit of a gray area situation there, okay? Can I pay into the Spanish public system? So after 1 year of residency in Spain, there is a social security scheme that enables you to access the public healthcare system. The good thing is that this system will cover you for the treatment of any pre-existing conditions. It will cover you for everything. It's true that under this scheme, you will have to pay the retail price of your medicines. So medicines won't be subsidized, as different is that if you're paying social security, like I am paying as I am an autónomo or freelancer in Spain, I have full access to the system and also subsidized medicines. Under the Convenio Especial, you won't have the full subsidy, but still you will get treatments for your pre-existing conditions, right? So many people that have pre-existing conditions after 1 year, they decide to go to the public healthcare system, or even keep, both private and public, which is my recommendation if you have the means. Now, you're going to pay 60 euros per month if you're younger than 65 years, and 157 euros per month if you're older than 65 years old. Can I use my current health insurance from the UK and USA? Short answer is, if it's NLB compliant, yes. But the long answer and the real answer I want you to take as advice is that you shouldn't do it, because there's many reasons why your let's say origin country health insurance policy could be denied. Okay, there's many reasons. Okay, for example, travel health insurances are not accepted clearly, and the officer reviewing your case could esteem that your current coverage is a travel health insurance in Spain. They usually have co-payment clauses. Okay, in all the conditions, maybe they find one doctor type has co-payments. That's straight denial. Maybe reimbursements. Okay. And maybe the certificate of coverage that they are supplying is not in Spanish. You need to sworn translate it. You have to translate every single page. That's a cost. And maybe the wording is not correct for what the consulate or BLS office needs to accept your submission. So all these issues, and maybe more than I'm forgetting, can be blocks. Good news are that health insurance policies, companies in Spain are generally, I can say they're very good. And they are very affordable. Okay, I am admin of several Americans moving to Spain group, and I can tell you that people are absolutely in love with those companies because they're paying just a fraction of the cost of what they're paying in the States. To give you an example, so really, I wouldn't really have risk having a headache because of just keeping your current health insurance policy, potentially overlap them, and then decide later on. Can I apply with a UK S1 form if I'm a UK retiree? Yes. Do I need a Spanish bank account to hire these policies? No, you don't. But if you have one, okay, if it happens that you have a Spanish bank account, potentially you could arrange, depending on the company or the broker, to pay monthly, not the full year in advance. Potentially, but this is very specific case. Can I pay on a monthly basis, as I said, in this situation? Can there be reimbursements? Gray area, depending on the consulate, depending on the officer reviewing your case. Could be a reason for denial. I wouldn't recommend it. Will I get a refund if I am denied? Okay, so this will depend on the cancellation clause of the policy that you're signing. You need to read all the contract. So there's going to be different cancellation clauses. There's going to be good ones, bad ones, and ugly ones. Okay, what are the ugly ones? Like there's no refund whatsoever. The good ones, full refund, no questions asked, only maybe providing a letter of denial of the consulate. Okay, that would be enough. Okay, but some of them would be halfway. We will refund you 50% or everything less taxes, or we'll refund you only if the reason for denial was the health insurance itself. Okay, so be careful with that, because that could be a potential problem. Because if you're paying a full year in advance and you get denied for any reason, or you change your plans, okay, then you could lose everything. So be careful with that. Now, if you are using Spainguru's recommendation, here, if you go to services, healthcare, here, I work with Carlos Blanco, exclusive agent of Adeslas. He has a full refund clause, okay, for denial of the visa. No matter why they deny you your visa, he will refund your health insurance. Okay, so you are pretty much covered in case that happens, which I hope it doesn't. But if in case it does, you're covered by a good cancellation clause. And that's why one of the reasons why I recommend working with Carlos, because I think it's the best for Spainguru members. Now let's talk about the different companies that are out there. So you have Adeslas, Asisa, DKV, ASA, Salus, Caser, Sanitas, AXA, Mafre. These are all good companies, very good companies. There are smaller differences, okay? And a lot of people are asking, like, is this one better? Okay, so you have some that are more expensive, that they have more coverage, but the differences are quite small, in my opinion. And also, there is a lot of dynamism in this market. Like, for example, if you're like working with a certain doctor, that doctor this year is working with your health insurance, but maybe the next year he doesn't work anymore with your health insurance because they negotiated other deals. So, doctors and And hospitals can change from health insurances. So it's not something that happens all the time, like every single year, but it can happen. So have that in mind. Now, if size matters, by far Adeslas is the largest one in Spain with almost 30% of the market. Then you have Sanitas, Bupa Group, you have Asisa, DKV, Mafra, etc. Okay, so I would say that I think it was 26% of population in Spain has private health insurance, and part of that 29% of that 26% has Adeslas. So Adeslas, it is, I would say, the most cost effective, okay, best value for money, generally, or most chosen company. Okay, I've used it in the past. I don't use it now because I did have a job before that enlisted me in another one, and I stayed with that one. But yes, I was very, very happy with Adeslas. Okay, it was great coverage and everything was fine. Some things here that are happening that I really don't like. For example, Washington, D.C. and recently Manila, people got a pop-up in the BLS website trying to sell them travel health insurance, which is very, very misleading. And you can see on the bottom left corner of the screen that both BLS and the consulate websites say that no travel health insurance will be accepted for the application of the non-lucrative visa. So it is very misleading that you get a pop-up saying like, buy this health insurance, but it's a travel health insurance. This is probably some effort from part of BLS to increase their revenue and sell stuff for people. And I've been seeing all this for other services as well, but it can be extremely misleading because if you purchase this travel health insurance and you think you're covered for the application, actually not, and you will be denied ipso facto. Okay, I'm still waiting for something to fix the situation. But yeah, basically, don't use that travel health insurance. And yes, hopefully this kind of fraudulent behavior will stop happening. As I mentioned, I work with Carlos Blanco, his exclusive agent for Adeslas, and he's also an immigration lawyer. Okay, so in his team, he has immigration lawyers, has experts in health insurance, compliant for any Spanish visas, or if you don't need compliance in general for visas, also he sells other kinds of policies, but he's expert in, first of all, dealing with English speakers, foreigners who are moving to Spain using Spanish visas, including non-lucrative visas, and he knows everything about the processes. Okay, so understands perfectly about the timings. He understands what you're going through, what you need exactly. He understands what documentation you need. So he does like dozens of these ones every month. So yeah, definitely he's the person to talk, and he will always talk with you with an initial, let's say, consultation on your situation previous to any application of your health insurance. He will give you a non-binding quote, and if you decide to move forward, then perfect. One important and special thing about him is that he has start date extensions. Now, most of the companies will not start the policy 1 month more in advance, okay, from when you purchase it. Okay, he can do up to 3 months, and then when the date is coming next to it, he can continue extending it. Okay, but initially for 3 months in advance, which is a great advantage because many people find out that the visa is taking longer to be accepted or whatever, there's some delay, etc., and it's big headaches, and potentially a liability because the consulates or BLS, when they review your case, and if you're already your coverage started, they will say, oh, you're already 2 months inside your coverage of your year, but you don't have coverage in the final 2 months. I've seen this. There's been denials because of this. People have to provide like an automatic renewal letter, but sometimes that was not accepted. Okay, so really, I think this is a great thing to point out if you work with him. You have wonderful reviews of Spainguru community members out there working with him. So yes, I mean, definitely one of my top partners there, and it's important to understand what makes him different and better to the others out there. Now, we said that the medical certificate is also health, but it's not related to health insurance. Okay, the medical certificate is a one-page document. You can see there a screenshot. Every consulate/BLS office in general, if you search for medical certificate non-lucrative visa PDF on Google, you will get a template. Okay, try to use the template provided by your specific consulate. Right now, generally, the template is this. The best one that you can use is the one that comes in English and in Spanish, because if you get the Spanish side signed by the doctor too, you will avoid having to have a sworn translation, which costs money, okay, like 35, 40 euros per page. Now, depending which doctor you are using, you will have certain different requirements, or from where you're applying, okay? But this information overlaps. For example, in the UK, if you're using a UK doctor, and by the way, if you need to use a UK doctor, here you go to Services, Healthcare, Medical Certificates, UK doctor. You can find online accepted certificates signed from UK doctors that are FCDO registered. This is very important in the UK for UK signatures. Why? Because UK doctors' signature needs to be apostilled. And if you're using a single language certificate, only in English, you have to sworn translate it. But it's very important in the UK, the doctor is FCDO registered. So otherwise, the certificate wouldn't be valid in front of Spanish authorities. Now, for example, in the USA or Canada, they don't have these requirements. The medical certificate doesn't need to be apostilled, okay? It is enough by printing it with the official doctor's letterhead, that the signature appears wet ink in both English and Spanish, stamp of the doctor showing a registration number, making it look official. That would be enough. If it's only in English, also sworn translated, but no apostille. Now, there's a third option, which is using a Spanish doctor. Okay, I will tell you there's many pros and one little con. It's important to know. If you go here to Services, Healthcare, Spanish doctor, right? I put you in contact with a Spanish doctor. Okay, you fill a form, you say which consulate you're applying from, all right? And the doctor will get in touch with you. Everything is online, the UK doctor, the Spanish doctor. But what is happening with the Spanish doctor? First of all, you don't need to apostille. Second of all, you don't need to sworn translate it because the certificate is in Spanish already. Okay, and this certificate, for example, is valid in all the UK consulates without conditions, okay, lately. But in the past, there's been consulates that had a strict interpretation, and they asked that you were physically inside Spain when the certificate was issued. By the way, the validity of the certificates are 3 months, this certificate. Some consulates in the past, Manchester had this criteria. Now, it doesn't anymore. London, Edinburgh, and Manchester, now they're accepting this certificate, even if you were not in Spain at the time of issuance. But some consulates abroad do have this interpretation. For example, I heard Lisbon has the interpretation, San Francisco too, okay? But for example, Miami is accepting this. If I'm not wrong, Washington, D.C. is accepting it, etc. So if you're interested and you want to use this Spanish doctor, you can fill the form. No, it's non-binding. You just fill the form. He'll contact you and he'll tell you whether your consulate is accepting his certificate. So you're sure you're bringing the right certificate, okay? And why you could potentially be using this doctor? Well, first of all, you say the apostilles from translation, but also first frequently asked question. My doctor won't sign the medical certificate template. What can I do? And this happens, you know, you've been going all your life to a doctor or the doctor you have next to your place where you live. You go with the medical certificate and the doctor says, what is this? What is this Spanish thing? They don't want to sign it, or they want to change the wording. Be careful with that. Some doctors in the past added things like, to the best of my knowledge, blah, blah, blah. No, the wording has to be like in the template. Not a single comma should be changed. I'm telling you. And sometimes they don't want to sign it, or they want to do blood tests, okay, urine tests. They want to test you for different illnesses, and that's really, really crazy. So potentially you could use a Spanish doctor as a solution, okay? Then, my doctor is not FCDO registered. Is his certificate valid? This is for the UK. No, unfortunately, they need to be registered at the FCDO or Foreign Office, okay, so that you can apostille his signature. How do I know the Spanish doctor certificate is accepted at my consulate? Just fill the form and mention which consulate you will be applying from, and the doctor will tell you, yes, my certificate is accepted, or I had problems in the past, etc. Okay, this unfortunately one more of those, let's say, strict considerations that any given consulate can have at any given time, unfortunately, but it is nowhere in the law or in the regulations that this certificate cannot be issued online, Zoom, remotely. Okay, so this situation, all this that I just explained you is summarized in this table that you can watch later on if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you like the information that I'm sharing with you today, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel. You can always send me an email anytime to hello@spainguru.es if you have any question. And of course, if you need to leave earlier today for any reason, you can always leave me a review on Trustpilot. There's a red button there on top. It will just redirect you to Trustpilot where you can leave a review there. I would really, really appreciate it. Now let's continue. Criminal background check. This is usually the document that takes the longest to obtain. Okay, in the case of the USA, the FBI background check, it is quite quick to get a digital copy in your email, even during the same morning, during the same day you get it. But what it takes time is the apostille, because these certificates, they need to be apostilled and sworn translated to Spanish. Okay, so in the US, the apostille, the official way to do it, which is only $20 to apostille, okay, it takes between 3 to 7 weeks if you're unlucky, and that happens quite often. Okay, now there are private postal services in the US that I can offer you who can do it for in just 10 days. Okay, they have a walk-in service, and you can find those services here. And immigration, postal services, and here you have USA and UK private services. So these are faster, and they also sometimes offer you the service to sworn translate directly, etc. So yes, you can find those private services as well there, and it will take only 10 business days compared to 7 weeks sometimes, and it's not uncommon to hear that it took 7 weeks to apostille. Okay, now the ACRO in the UK, depending, you have premium service or ordinary service. Premium service, I hear people who's taking like 2 days, only 3 days to get the copy, and then the apostille can go quite fast. But if you don't use the premium service, which is quite expensive, then it will take a few weeks to get it. Okay, as of today, when I'm reading in the groups, this can change, of course, all the time, anytime, right? Remember that these certificates have a certain validity period, depending on the consulate where you're applying from, or what the certificate says on it. Like, this certificate is valid for a certain period. Okay, usually 6 months, usually, but it could be that it's valid for 3 months only. Okay, so please, this is not legal advice. Always check the validity periods of your documentation when you're gonna submit it, and plan accordingly. Let's talk about the questions. Am I still eligible with records on my background check? Now, it will depend how serious those records are. In the previous 5 years, has to be squeaky clean. Now, previous to those 5 years will depend, of course, if you served conviction time, was violent crimes, fraud. I've been hearing like serious stuff. Usually it is a denial. The way to do it is, first, you will try to delete those records in your home countries via your expungement or crime records deletion processes. They usually take time, more than 1 year, so you have to plan very much ahead if you want to delete them. Another way is working with a professional immigration lawyer. You can find them on Spainguru.es to make the case that in the Spanish system, those crimes should be deleted, and that's how the consulate should take it. So there's a way to frame all this information that lawyers know. I don't know, but this also has been successful. Now, if you had like smaller things, small demeanors, DUI, smoking pot outside of university 20 years ago, usually it's not a problem, okay? But it could lead to delays or whatever. So this is, again, inside the group of non-straightforward cases. Always go with legal help in those cases. Am I still eligible with a no-life trace for the UK ACRO? Yes, but the consulate will require an extra report from the police that tells or explains what record is underlying that no-life trace. And depending on that, they will take a decision or not. Can I expedite the background check federal apostille? As I said, no, but you could use a private service. Can I notarize the background check and use a state apostille instead? No, always use a federal apostille or it's going to be a straight denial. Where can I have my fingerprints taken? You can use USPS offices in the States. You can use FBI-approved channelers. I have articles about this. Search Spainguru FBI apostille, and the main article will come out on Google. If you're applying from outside of Spain, There are different ways to do it. Also, I have articles on that. What if I mean, if you're applying from Spain, no. If you're gathering documentation from outside of Spain, because you cannot apply from outside let's say the consulate, you need to submit the paperwork in the consulate. What if my fingerprints are illegible? This also happens to many senior people. Their fingerprints fade out with time, and sometimes the scanners are not very good. But basically, FBI channelers tend to have better scanners than the USPS offices. So I have a few recommendations if you send me an email. So these are just screenshots from our community. ACRE is taking 2 days with fast track, 2 to 6 weeks normally. In Canada, it's going pretty fast as well. And circling back to this question we mentioned before, you will have to quit before applying the non-lucrative visa. But first, let's go with straightforward cases. If you're a pensionist, if you're a retiree, this visa type is usually called a retirement visa. Okay, this is the most straightforward case. People who want to retire in Spain, they're receiving a pension. There's absolutely no doubt that these people are not working and are not gonna work once they're in Spain. So if you're still working, most consulates in the UK at least will ask you to quit and provide a P45 form. The US, resignation letter, termination letter from employer, both translated and notarized. If you're freelancers, the US, notarized affidavit promising not to work. In the UK, a letter from HMRC, an accountant, stating having ceased trading and the register for self-employment. Should I quit before I get the visa? Let's talk about that later on. Is renting out a property considered a job? Size matters. If you have 1-2 properties, you rent them on a long-term basis. There's not many operations involved, then it's passive income. But if you have 30 properties on Airbnb, you have an operation, you have business. You will be denied if you use that type of income, right? So if you are somewhere in between, make sure to make it clear that it is passive income. People suggest hiring a property manager, property management company, that they just, wire transfer you the proceeds of the business, and it's pretty sure you're proving that you're not part of the operations. Is investing in stocks considered active income? No. Can I volunteer while on an NLV? Yes, you can, as long as you don't get paid for it. Now, can I still work at the time of application, right? And this is a very, very, very crazy nuanced answer, okay? That will depend vastly on the consulate, will depend vastly on the humor of the officer reviewing your case. In the UK, people said that in the past, one way was to show the P45, but so is a letter from your employer stating that you have resigned and will leave on a certain date, always before the day that you ask for the visa to start. But someone else reports saying that it looks like a bit of a potluck if they accept a letter from HR department in place of this P45 form if you're working until the last minute. And people until today are asking in UK consulates about, can I still work, etc. I don't know if I'm going to get my visa granted. Why should I quit? And there's no clear answer, because if that's the case, for sure, I would say almost for sure, they will give you only 10 days to provide the P45 after your initial application, right? So, kind of like they want the P45, okay, in the UK. That's the situation. Now, in the UK, until now, they seem to be more welcoming to this situation in which you are working and, you are putting a condition to stop working. If you get your visa granted, people were, let's say, stating or promising that they were going to stop working on a date prior to the visa start. But some people reported that this was not accepted. In this case, Houston rejected the application because retirement was still in the future, even if the future resignation date was prior to the visa start request. Applicants was told they can only apply after officially retiring with updated documents. So pretty rough, this situation. And I asked also expert immigration lawyers about this. And in fact, there is nowhere in the law that states that you need to not be working at the time of application. So again, this is one of those crazy interpretations, hardcore interpretations of certain consulates and officials that are making people's lives worse, okay, more difficult. Okay, so if you're in this situation in general, I would go also with a lawyer who can defend your interests. Make sure that if they deny you because of this reason, you will be that will be, let's say, appealed and potentially put in the right direction. Okay. Now this other case, this is Washington D.C. As we mentioned, they asked for a rental contract for at least 3 months. These people booked on Airbnb, shortened from 3 to 2 months before the approval. But what they mentioned about the work situation is that the DC consulate required resignation proof dated before the visa start and sworn statements of non-work in Spain. So in this case, same situation as the Houston case, but in this case, they were accepted. So as you can see, depending on the consulate and the mood of the officer that day, that thing can change. Another thing I want to bring to your attention is the crazy case of Venezuelan national who applied for NLV at the Buenos Aires consulate in December 2023. He got denied because he showed activity on LinkedIn. So many people say that consulates, Spanish consulates, are not allowed to Google you and go through your social networks and everything. Well, here you have the proof that they do it if they want. And this person appealed, went to court in Madrid, and Madrid court said that the consulate was right. Okay, so apparently they can Google you, they can check your life and see whether you are having activity in your LinkedIn and deny you because of that and all the ramifications that all this brings us to. So be careful about working at the last moment. It is always a risk that you're taking. If you're planning to take that risk, always go with legal help and frame the whole thing correctly so there's no doubt that you are not working or planning to work. Now, let's talk about marriage, birth certificates, non-married couples. Married couples need a valid and updated marriage certificate, usually 6 months validity. If you're bringing children, same for birth certificates. Non-married couples can also apply, but they need to prove their relationship. Strong case, you have a legal partnership. Okay, so you need to supply this also certificate. Okay, but if you don't have it, then you fall under the figure of stable partners. How do you prove that you are stable partners? At least 1 year cohabitation, or potentially if you have children together, it can be shorter time because having a children together makes a stronger case. Okay, but still, this stable partnership, it's gonna be a little bit at the discretion of the officer reviewing your case. Okay, you can use any means of proof showing that you have a stable partnership. Many people have failed to prove that they were couples, and the way that they solved this problem was to apply both as main applicants, of course, raising the financial threshold, not only for the initial application, but also for the renewal, unless they got married later on or they really finalized their legal partnership. Okay, always the certificates need to be apostilled by the authorities who issue it. For example, if you got married in California, it's the California State Apostille. If you got married in Cyprus, Cyprus authorities, etc., etc. And if the certificate is not in Spanish, if you were married in Colombia, for example, it needs to be apostilled by Colombian authorities, but it doesn't need to be sworn translated because it's already in Spanish. But if it's not in Spanish, sworn translation. What about adult children and ascendants? Unfortunately, after the renewal, let's say the new regulation of the law, Reglamento de Extranjería, as of May 20th, 2025, adult children and ascendants cannot be dependents any longer, and they must apply separately as main applicants. If you're in this situation, you want to bring your adult dependents, and you have a remote job, potentially the digital nomad visa is an option because it still lets you bring them, because these are two different laws. Okay, one is entrepreneur law and the other one is this other law. So yes, the Article 61, you can see there underlined in red everything what I'm saying if you want to read the specific article talking about this. We mentioned a lot about sworn translations, but who are sworn translators? These are special translators. Not everyone is one. They are only appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They pass a hard exam to become certified. Each of them, they get a unique registration number, unique stamp, and their translations are accepted by all Spanish institutions, including consulates abroad. Important, you don't need to send physical papers overseas to get the translations. Everything can be done online. The way it works is that you scan the documents, you send them by email to the sworn translator. Sworn translator tells you how much it will charge you for the job, when you need it, depending on urgency, they will charge you one way or another, and they will return you the digital document with a signature normally done via Adobe, etc. So you print out that document with the signature of the sworn translator, and that's what you submit with your filing, right? So no physical email is needed, okay? Now, if you need sworn translators, you can find my recommendations here on services, immigration, sworn translators, okay? And important thing, this company translate, they have any language pair, okay? Not only I have Spanish, English, English, Spanish, but also you can have, if you married in Germany, for example, I have German, Spanish, or wherever, okay? They basically have every single language pair that exists. So really, really cool. And yeah, definitely useful because it's completely online. You just upload the document, you get the quote immediately, and they have fast service in less than 24 hours or more, 72 hours. So for different rates, you get different levels of delivery. So really, really cool. Oh yeah, we go for the frequently asked questions. Can I use any translator from the American Translator Association? I mentioned this association because Miami Consulate or BLS and Los Angeles BLS mentioned this association as the right place to go for sworn translations, which is extremely misleading because you don't need to be a sworn translator appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be part of this association. It has nothing to do except for the fact that they have the same job, but the validity of the signature is completely different story. So please pay attention to this. Use a sworn translator appointed by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay, this association has not much to do. Can a sworn translator work with several language pairs? No, usually we only work with one. But as I mentioned to you before, if you work with agencies, they have agreements with sworn translator for every single language pair. How much do sworn translations cost? So for the usual documents that are submitted for the NLV is between 35 to 45 euros per page, depending on the complexity of the document and the level of urgency that you need to get them back, okay? How much, what comes first, apostille, then sworn translation? So many lawyers will tell you that the zero risk situation is to get the certificate, for example, FBI background check, yes, send it to apostille, get the apostille, and then sworn translate both the certificate, the background check, and also sworn translate the apostille. Some people choose not to sworn translate the apostille. Some consulates are okay not receiving the sworn translation of the apostille. This was the case, for example, of Bob, who you can watch the video. I published on a couple of Sundays ago his application in Miami. He got married in Germany, and he had an apostille from German authorities, I believe, and the certificate came in several languages. And he asked the Miami consulate, should I still apostille? And the Miami consulate was fast as answering and said, no, it wasn't necessary. So in many cases, you don't need to sworn translate the apostille, okay? So that's a little bit also a nuanced situation, but the certificate for sure, you need to sworn translate for absolutely sure. Count on it. Bank statements, also big question, because many people have several months bank statements, summary pages. It can be a fortune to sworn translate all this. Most people choose not to sworn translate them, 77%. When I ask this, some people only sworn translated the summary pages. Some people sworn translate everything. If you're working with lawyers, with an agency, usually they have sworn translators that are in-house, and they choose to sworn translate everything because for them it's not an extra cost. If you're doing it yourself, probably it's possible to not have any problems without sworn translating if the bank statements are in English, of course. If they're in another language, well, unfortunately, I mean, it's not likely, but it could happen. But you need to sworn translate them to Spanish if they're not in English. But in most cases, people don't sworn translate or sworn translate only the summary pages that are maybe one or two. So yes, that's the situation. There's no clear answer to this question. That's why we have a poll as an answer. Now let's talk about some more updates. This is a little bit also take it with a pinch of salt. But basically, after May 20th, 2025, with the new Reglamento de Extranjería, there were no major changes to the non-lucrative visa. Okay, no major changes. They were talking about the renewals periods were going to go from 2 years to 4 years. That didn't happen. Okay, the NLV is not stricter. Okay, they just added in practical like for in practicality, okay, some more certificates, okay, and that was not part actually of the new Reglamento de Extranjería. It seems to coincide the dates in which certain consulates decided to start asking for more certificates, or they receive an order saying like, hey guys, you need to stop fraud or start being harder with fraud about, you know, bank accounts. Maybe people are using bank accounts that it's not theirs, so make sure that everything matches. So this is more or less what changed, okay? It's true that with the new Reglamento de Extranjería, they added a minimum stay requirement for the renewal of this visa and any other temporary visa in Spain. But we're going to talk about that because, again, it is a very ambiguous situation. I'm going to go deeper into that, okay? Then, depending on each consulate, you have different story. That's why I highly recommend you going and join the Spainguru Facebook group and read other people's experiences. So just have that in mind, okay? Every consulate may be different. Now, the difference may be between, let me change the slide. Doesn't let me. There you go. United Kingdom, as I said, no tax returns are required. The visa fee is higher, okay? And some lawyers are legalizing an apostilling the bank documents, okay? This is not very clear if it's like a common requirement, that some lawyers are doing this, okay? And as we said, UK consulates tend to be more strict about proving that you're not working when you apply by providing the P45, okay? Now in the US, they will ask for tax returns in most cases, and each consulate will have their own different rules and interpretations. In general, the visa fee is lower than in the UK. And for example, Los Angeles, big question is, can I have loans or mortgages allowed? And depending who you ask, they will tell you one thing or another, because it is an official requirement in the LA consulate not having a mortgage. But many people were approved with a mortgage at LA BLS. And some lawyers, they said it's no problem. Some lawyers says, yeah, it's a big problem. You need to make sure to have the mortgage, you know, in another bank account and not showing the income coming to the same bank account or something, or, you know, like, but it will be in the tax return. So I don't know exactly how they frame it, but yeah, for some it is a problem. So it's not very clear. It seems that, in my opinion, it seems that mortgages are not a problem in LA anymore. But yeah, some people probably maybe are overly cautious with a reason, because it is a listed requirement not to have a mortgage. Chicago, you need to show a 3-month lease. New York, there's no BLS. You deal with the consulate directly. Miami, 12 months of bank statements. Notarized affidavit not to work. Boston, no RRA 401k accepted. 3 years of tax returns. 3-month statements, so less bank statements. Washington, D.C., 3-month lease, as we said, as we saw before. Motivation letter, affidavit not to work. San Francisco, proof of not working required. Also, San Francisco is crazy about getting appointments lately. Houston, 12-month statements, affidavit explaining reason for move. Work history, promise not to work. And I would add also school enrollment for kids, and also lease for 3 months, like some other consulates. Remember, if you want to stay updated about everything related to the non-lucrative visa, remember, I have a YouTube channel with 7,400 subscribers, more than 1,000 videos on YouTube, half of them about the non-lucrative visa. So really, I think it is the most prolific channel about this subject. Definitely have a it's worth it to subscribe. Of course, it's free and you can unsubscribe anytime. So yeah, definitely, if you like any video there, please give it a like. And if you're watching this on YouTube right now, please give it a like. It really, really helps. So thank you so much. And if you're not, and you want to leave a review on Trustpilot, there's a red button there on top where they will redirect you to Trustpilot. And you can leave a review there, and it will be really, really helpful. Thank you so much. Now let's continue. Now we're going to talk about during the application. Now the visa validity changed from 90 days to 365 days. They did this because it takes weeks, if not months, to obtain the residency card, and many people were left without a valid visa while trying to get their residency card. So they made it for 365 days with a multi-entry permit, so you can use your visa to get in and out of Spain anytime you want, until you get your residency card. Now, it is not very clear whether you should enter within the first 90 days, okay, as previously stated, as there is like an internal information from the immigration office that says or recommends entering within the first 90 days, even if your visa validity is for a full year. But still, we didn't have any feedback of anyone having any problems whatsoever entering after those initial 90 days. But we are very cautious because we know Spanish bureaucracy. We know that many people are involved, and we don't know maybe if there is any problem on the way. But the recommendation, if you have the flexibility and nothing changes in your plans, is entering in the first 90 days, as it used to be. Okay, even if your visa is granted for 1 year, maybe it's being overly cautious. If you don't have any option and you need to enter after the first 90 days, it seems that there shouldn't be any problem. But just this is, let's say, our recommendation. When I say our, is my recommendation, and I know Manero from Sternabuel's recommendation. Hopefully, we're absolutely wrong. We're overly cautious, and soon we'll be able to say that you can enter in the last day of that 1 year validity period, and hopefully that will be the case without any issues with anyone. But yes, take it with a little bit of let's say, be conservative about this, in my opinion. Now, common mistakes to avoid: not checking specific consular requirements. Okay, always check, and also do it recurrently. Check your consular requirements in English, in Spanish. Check the BLS office website in your town, in your city, okay, with the requirements, and read first-hand experiences that tell you internal requirements that are not posted anywhere. So be prepared with all this. And quoting one Spainguru community member saying that this person was checking the requirements every 15 days. And he said that every single time he found a new thing, either because he forgot it or didn't pay attention because the list is too long, or because they really are updating and changing this all the time. So be careful with that. So you are all very, very prepared when you apply. Then wrong documents. Showing wrong documents, for example, a state apostille in your FBI background check, that would be a wrong document. Expired documents, there's a certain validity period, you're outside of it. Wrong chronology, right? For example, you start with the FBI background check because you say it's going to take very long, but you got married in South Africa, and I heard that getting an apostille in South Africa is very, very hard. It takes very, very long. So maybe if that is your situation, the right chronology would be starting with the marriage certificate in the country, right? To give you an example, wrong health insurance, having co-payments, potentially reimbursements, etc. Right? Say that you plan to work, or not enough proof that you're not working, or you're not good enough to convince the office reviewing your case that you are not working or have plans to do so. If you understand me, we already commented a lot on this. How much in advance you can start? Well, to gather documents, at least 6 months in the US or Canada, or a little bit less time for the UK. It tends to be faster. Most consulates retain passport during the processing of this visa. Yesterday, we heard someone applying in Guatemala say that he got his passport back. So he was asking, like, is this normal? Well, some consulates, they give you the passport back, and then you go back later on when they grant the visa so that they can stick it on your passport. You bring your passport and that's it. But generally in the US and the UK, they will keep your passport. And this is a big deal because you can't travel without your passport. In the US, it is quite easy to obtain a second passport from US authorities. In the UK, it's almost impossible. Now, some consulates, they have released a form where you can make your case why you need your passport back. I heard that this is happening in Manchester, but apparently it's not working very well. But, maybe you can ask in your consulate/BLS whether this form exists, and you can keep your passport if it's necessary. But yeah, consider that the visa processing can take anything from 10 days to 3 months, even sometimes longer. Manchester is longer now, what I'm hearing. So yeah, it's a lot of time without that passport, especially for UK nationals that they don't have, like, let's say, a documento nacional de identidad. They just have their passport. So it's very, very difficult. How long does the preparation take? Documents preparation, usually 2 to 3 months. Attending appointment, 3rd month. Wait for approval, 2 months approximately. Maximum 3, supposedly, but can be anything. 10 days period. If they ask for extra documentations, then you can choose your visa start date in a 90-day window from application date. Although this is recently changing. We're going to go through those changes that not all consulates are applying right now. This is a transition period. It's going to take time for this, let's say, time frames to change to what the new rules say, but this is generally what has been happening and still happens. And officially, once you enter Spain, within the visa validity period, when you get the start, the entry stamp or declaración de entrada, you have 30 days to get your residency card in Spain from a national police station. This is the plastic card with your image, with your residency status, with your foreigner identification number or NIE, okay? But usually it is very hard to get appointments, and it will take you weeks, if not months, to get that residency card. About timeframes, and circling back to the private health insurance, this Spainguru community member says you can ask for the visa to be valid for up to 3 months in advance. However, the difficulty I found was finding a health insurance company who would work that far out, as most only do 2. And of course, you can solve this problem using Spainguru's exclusive agent, Carlos Blanco. And this is a way to see how the timeline looks like. Imagine that you submit your documents on date A. You can choose your visa start date 90 days in the future. And imagine that before that date, you get your visa granted and the visa starts on letter B. So supposedly, and the recommendation, although it could be wrong and overly cautious, you should enter Spain within the first 90 days of the visa start date. So you decide to fly to Spain on letter C. And once you enter Spain, you will have 30 days to get your residency card. Now, it can take months to get the residency card, but once you get it, the entry in Spain within the visa validity period will usually be your first date of your residency. So your first date of your residency plus 365 days should be the expiration date on your TA card. You can start renewing your non-lucrative residency 60 days before the expiration date on your TA card, and it is highly recommended that you do it as soon as possible. In case anything goes wrong, you still have days left to fix those problems. Another way to see it, and of course this is for illustrative purposes only, things can happen before or after, but let's go with it. First, you find your consulate. Does it work with BLS office? Then you work with BLS office too. Check the consulate requirements, BLS requirements, English, Spanish. Check internal requirements. Then you start collecting your documents. Start with the hard ones first, depending on your case. Usually the police checks, ACRO, FBI background checks. Then you obtain your medical certificate with a 3 months validity. You apostille and translate all the necessary documents. Then you get your private health insurance, or potentially, if you want, you have the option, instead of a private health insurance, if you're a UK pensionist, to use the S1 form. Book an appointment with your consulate. Usually this takes months to obtain, so you should maybe start earlier than this chart. Then you attend the appointment. Once you get it, you submit the paperwork, and then you wait for the visa to process. You wait for the notification. Sometimes they send you the passport. Sometimes you need to pick it up. Sometimes you need to pick it up in person with all your family members, depending on the consulate, depending on the office. And then you get your visa, which starts a certain validity. Now for 1 year, recommended entering in the first 90 days as of today. And then once you enter Spain, there are certain things that you need to do, like potentially obtaining your empadronamiento, which is your rental contract registration in the city hall office. They will give you a certificate that is a proof of address that most national police stations will require when you go to get your residency card. Another way to see this is a Gantt chart. You can see here every column is a month. So you see January until November. If you start in February getting your police check, marriage certificate, birth certificate, you will get certain validity periods, usually 6 months. Then you get apostilles and translations for those documents. Then you get in April your financial documents, medical certificates, health insurance just before the appointment, but with enough time for the company to provide you with the documents. Okay, usually they take between 15 days is more than enough for them to supply these certificates. They can be done faster, much faster, if they are good, of course. And then again, you need to get apostilles and translations, and of course you need to have started trying to get the appointment at least a couple of months before your intended date to get the appointment, at least 2 months. My opinion, for every consulate in the US. Maybe in the UK it takes shorter time, but sometimes there's a lot of workload and not so much staff, especially during high season months, which is summertime and Christmas. They're understaffed, people take holidays, so there's and also before the summer there's a lot of student visa applications, so they move staff to those visa applications, and then their NLV applicants are a little bit left on the side, and then they get all the approval at once. So it is quite problematic to apply during those time periods. Some changes in the timeframes, as I said, new regulation. The regulations are one thing and the reality is another, so take it with a pinch of salt. But applications must now be submitted no later than 2 months before your planned arrival in Spain, except unless exceptional reasons justify a shorter time frame. You can submit your application as early as 6 months and up to 2 months prior to your intended entry dates. Okay, so, and also another thing that they added in the rules is that the decision deadline should be 1 month from the consulate communication. So when they receive the documents from BLS and they send to Spain, it's not very clear when that happens, but supposedly after 1 month, it doesn't mean that you are denied, but if you didn't get an answer, you can start a process to get an answer, okay, or kind of an appeal, okay, but officially it is a negative administrative silence, okay, so this is like a default rejection if no decision within that month. Officially what happens, but I can tell you that no one got a rejection because of this right now, and I see a lot of people getting accepted after that initial month. So really, reality doesn't meet the rule here. You can see the Article 63, what that talks about all this, so that you are informed. But as I said, reality goes in another direction as of today. Let's go back to taxes and timings as well. This is very important for people who are, for example, selling their homes. If you're going to sell your home in many origin countries, you don't have capital gains tax, but in Spain are quite high. They're taxed at progressive rates ranging from 19% to 30% on the proceeds of your sale of your house, for example, or other rights. It could be anything. But usually people tend to sell their homes before moving to Spain. And there are ways to mitigate or even just not pay this tax. And you know, these conditions are that if you're selling like your main property and you use the full proceeds of that sale, your primary property, to buy another primary property, for example, in Spain, or if you're older than 65, or, you know, certain conditions that can help you mitigate that capital gains tax, but you need to be very meticulous when you get the documentation in order to prove that you are within this situation, but have it in mind. But another way is just to avoid becoming a Spanish tax resident during the same calendar year in which the sale happens. Best way to understand it, you know that tax year is calendar year from January 1st to December 31st. Every 1st of January, the clock is set to 0. It's a new tax year. So if you sell your home in December 31st and you move to Spain on January 1st, they fall into different tax years. This is the best way to avoid it. This is the first case. You sell in 2025 and you move to Spain in 2026. But many people sell in January, get their visa in April, and then they move later in Spain. Now, you have to observe the first rule of becoming a tax resident, not to become one during the same calendar year in which you sold your home. That is spending less than 182 days in that calendar year. That is, if you want to be on the safe side, not being in Spain until July 2nd, and then you can stay in Spain every day until next year, because that year you won't be a tax resident in Spain. But if you made a mistake and you, for example, you were doing a scouting trip in March and you spent 182 days after July 2nd in Spain, and you spent 10 days as a tourist in March, well, you have to add those days, what we mentioned. You spent 192 days during the calendar year, and now you're a Spanish tax resident since January 1st, that same calendar year, retroactively. And that home sale, those proceeds are going to be taxed as capital gains tax by Spanish tax authorities, okay? And if you made 100K proceeds, ballpark figures, you're going to be paying 22,000 euros. Ballpark figures, okay? This is not tax advice or anything like that. Watch my webinar about taxes where I go a little bit deeper about this. So you want to avoid that, of course, by timing your move if you can, or at least going for the mitigation conditions for the capital gains tax. I have a lot of articles on my blog about pensions, about 401ks, about Roth IRAs, Social Security, capital gains tax, wealth tax, taxes in Spain for UK expats, US expats, inheritance in Spain. All those on Spainguru's blog posts. Just go there, search for the tax tag, and you'll be able to read them. All of them, I made videos about them. If you prefer videos formats, you can also watch them. And let's talk about after the approval. We mentioned the Schengen area. You can see it there on the right. Now, it makes a difference between arriving from outside of Spain into Spain, from outside of Schengen into Spain directly, or via another Schengen country. If you're flying from New York to Madrid, you'll get a stamp on your passport or a scan on your face that acts, with the new entry-exit system that acts as a proof of entry into Spain. This is very important, not Schengen. Now, if you fly from New York to Rome, okay, and then you travel around Italy, France, yes, and then you take a train from Paris to Barcelona, no one will be waiting you in the Spanish border. You are already within Schengen. There's no internal border control. You won't get a proof of entering Spain. So the solution, get a declaración de entrada, which is a one-page document that you can go to the nearest police station to the border or on the train station or in the airport and get it signed by the police and stamped. That is your proof of entry in Spain, which is necessary to show when you go later to get your residency card. That's very important. Second thing, get a Spanish SIM card and keep a SIM card for your phone to control your bank account in your origin country, and also you will be receiving 2FA messages. But the Spanish SIM is necessary because many authorities send you SMS for the procedures. When you hire utilities, etc., they want to send you SMS so you sign those contracts and everything. So having a Spanish SIM card is a very important thing. Open a non-resident bank account in any of the brick-and-mortar banks in Spain is very useful. At least get a Wise account in euros. They will give you an IBAN in a Belgian IBAN to use euros, and you can use the currency exchange within Wise. Okay, this is very interesting. And obtain an empadronamiento, as we mentioned before. Be careful because not all rental contracts will be accepted. Make sure that your landlord accepts you to be empadronado in the address, okay, and make sure that you comply with the rules of your specific ayuntamiento that change a lot. So yes, if you're moving to Madrid, go to the Madrid page and check all the requirements for the empadronamiento, which can be very different from Valencia. I recently released a video about this that you can watch on Spainguru's YouTube channel. Then, officially you have 30 days to obtain your TA card or residency card, which no one does. It can take months even. First question, is the empadronamiento strictly necessary to obtain the TA? Let's check the next slide. There are no appointments to obtain it. What should I do? So a lot of people say, my husband and I have been living in Valencia province for 4 months now on an NLV visa. We still not have been able to get an appointment at the Policía Nacional. No citas disponibles. The other one says, I am 5 months in Alicante. No luck. I don't know what to do. I'm desperate. This is what they say. And this is what a lawyer says. That works especially in this area. For the T appointment in practice, not required within 1 month. Appointments can take up to 6 months without issues, so sooner is better and no immediate rush. Tips, try to get appointments at any police station, even within the same province, okay, to get your TA card earlier. Empadronamiento, officially, really is not needed, okay? And the big police stations know this. For example, in Malaga, where I live, there's a big central police station and then a lot of smaller police stations. The big police stations now, they don't require empadronamiento. They know it's not an official requirement. But if you go to the smaller ones, they will require an empadronamiento. Okay, unfortunately, maybe you only get appointments in the small one that require empadronamiento. Okay, that's why it's so important to get an empadronamiento if you can, right? And if you're going to rent, it's very, very important that you check that you will be able to get your empadronamiento. It also takes time to get your first registration empadronamiento. Okay, in Malaga, it's taking 2 months. And the empadronamiento, 2 months to get the empadronamiento. It's a long time. So all this has to match. It's very, very difficult. But eventually, everyone gets the residency card. This is the Spanish bureaucracy. Everyone. In the end, I never heard anyone that had to go back to their country because they didn't get that residency card afterwards. Somehow, everyone solves these problems. But big police stations, they're okay. Maybe you show an Airbnb receipt, booking.com receipt, or a rental contract. This is the case of Malaga Central Police Station. But yeah, if you have the empadronamiento, it is much better. Now, when you have to renew the visa for the residency, empadronamiento is needed in most cases. Now, renewal process. When? 60 days before the expiration date of your TA card. You can start the process up to 90 days after the expiration date of your TA card. First renewal will give you 2 years of residency. Then you will need to renew for years 4 and 5. For year, 5th year, total 5 years, and then you are eligible to apply for the long-term residency. Okay. Now, we talked about the financial thresholds. In some provinces, they will ask you double the amount, and that is true. For example, Alicante province, they ask you double the amount in 2 years. So if you're applying with savings, there is no recurrent income, then yes, you need to have double the amount. You're a couple, 36,000 euros. IPREM didn't change. So for the renewal, if you're only talking about savings, you need to have 70,000 euros in the bank account. Okay. But if you're having a recurrent income, then it counts differently. Okay. And we're going to have a look at that. First, we're going to have, this is an example. Okay. Case study. Couple. They applied 36,000 euros in 2025. They need to prove that they have 72,000 euros in 2 years. Okay, this is for those promises who require 2 years. Main applicant has 30,000 euros annually. That means that this pension in 2 years counts as 60,000 euros. Therefore, because this is a passive recurrent income, counts double. You can see it that way, no? Because it's annually 30,000 euros, but in 2 years it's 60,000 euros. So they only need to prove 12,000 euros more. That can be savings, can be dividends, etc. Right? Even rental income. But as I said, it is no way accepted because many authorities think that this type of income is very risky because the tenants can't stop paying you, okay? Especially if that income comes from a Spanish property, okay? Now, something that really changed from May 20th, 2025 is the minimum stay requirement for the renewal of this visa. They added a 183-day minimum stay. Now, very important. People say, do you have to become a tax resident in order to renew your visa? And the straight answer is no. First of all, tax year and immigration year are very different. Tax year is a calendar year, and immigration year is your immigration year. If you enter, it says your natural immigration year. If you enter on July 2nd, 2025, your immigration year goes until July 2nd, 2026. And it may or not overlap with the tax year. Okay, so you can play with it. Second of all, there's a Supreme Court ruling that says that the minimum stay requirement should not be added to a reglamento de extranjería, a bylaw, lower hierarchy, remember, and it should be added to the high main organic law. Therefore, in the previous reglamento de extranjería, the legislators tried to add a minimum stay requirement of 180 days, but it had been removed. And in this case, they renewed the reglamento de extranjería, and it should also be removed because of this Supreme Court ruling. Okay, so we're in the middle of this ambiguous situation, but experienced lawyers, and I have videos interviewing Ainhoa Manero from Stern Abogados saying that, basically, this minimum stay requirement is not enforceable. Okay, so if you are denied because of this minimum stay requirement and renewal because of this, then you have 100% chance of winning it when you appeal. Okay, this is the situation about the minimum stay requirement for the renewal of the visa. Now, be careful. If you plan to stay longer term for the long-term residency, or to apply for the Spanish passport, there are other minimum stay requirements for those two other procedures, and you need to comply with them at the same time. Okay, so be careful, and that's why it's so useful to have an immigration lawyer who can help you out with a long-term strategy without making costly mistakes. For the long-term residency, there's several requirements, and you cannot be outside of Spain more than 10 months in the period of 5 years. Okay, share the way you want, but maximum 6 months at once, okay, in order to be eligible for the long-term residency. So you need to comply with that during 5 years. Okay, so we were talking about the renewal minimum stay, but if you, the non-lucrative visa renewal, but if you want to go for the long-term, be careful, they have their own resident, like minimum stay requirements. They also have other requirements, no uninterrupted residency during the period of 5 years, and no gaps in healthcare coverage. This is also very important. Many people have a problem with that. They don't renew their private health insurance. They have several month gap, and they're denied when they apply for the long-term residency and also for the renewal as well because of this, right? So be careful with that. And especially for dual passport holders from certain countries, in red in this map, Ibero-American countries and Philippines, they can access a 2-year fast track to be eligible to apply for the Spanish citizenship by residency, only 2 years, right? So they cannot be outside of Spain more than 90 days per each of those previous 2 years before applying for this citizenship. This is also extremely important, right? Now, if you're a holder of a long-term residency and you want to apply for the Spanish citizenship, you cannot be outside of the European Union for more than 1 year consecutively, or no more than 30 months in 5 years. So all those things you need to have in mind. I know it can be a little bit of a headache. That's why having legal advice is extremely important. Let's talk about the common pathways to go to work permits. So you can apply for an ordinary work permit from outside of Spain, but it is difficult. It is difficult because it has more requirements than if you enter Spain holding a residency, like a non-lucrative residency, and after 1 year, you decide to modify it to a work permit. It's much easier. Everyone says that. And the best way to do it, for talking about different pathways, is that you obtain the renewal of your non-lucrative residency. And once you get the renewal for 2 years, you apply for the modification to a work permit. Because if you get denied, it's not automatic. It's not like after 1 year non-lucrative residency, you get a work permit. No. Many people have criticized me in the past because, I make it look too easy. No, you need to be approved, okay? And it's not easy for many. So if anything goes wrong, you still have the renewal for your non-lucrative residency. So that's the way to go. Most common pathways is either you work for someone else or you work on your own project, okay? Cuenta propia is your own project. You need to prove that you have a realistic business plan. They need to approve it, etc., etc. And get a work permit for that to work, let's say, as a contractor, autónomo. Then you have cuenta ajena. You get a offer from a company, they're ready to sponsor you, okay? And then you do the paperwork and you get the work permit to work for someone else. Or this is controversial, potentially, if you have been working remotely during your non-lucrative residency and you have 3 months to prove that remote work, you could potentially modify it to a digital nomad visa. And there's been cases of that being a successful move as well. Now, we made it to the end of the presentation. As you can see here, you can always join the newsletter I send every Monday, where I feature top discussions on Spainguru social media, 15,000 readers, watch the YouTube channel, blog with more than 2,000 articles, and of course, dedicated Spanish non-lucrative visa Facebook group. I highly recommend you to join. Check the sections of more webinars, total 7 webinars. I have free all of them, and also this Move to Spain checklist and destinations as well. And if you need professional advice, I have so many services like immigration experts, tax advisor, financial planners, health insurance, medical certificates, phone translation, apostle services, and so much more. You can always send me an email to hello@spainguru.es. I always answer my emails. And remember, the content of this webinar is for information purposes only, and it's not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulates, requirements in English, Spanish, BLS offices, and also internal requirements reported by applicants in those consulates. Well, I haven't received any questions in the chat, so I guess the presentation was quite thorough. It's almost 2 hours here giving this presentation. I will send you an email with the link to watch the recording of this video. If you're watching this on YouTube, haven't done so yet, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you have any questions, always you can comment in the comments below. Hope you had a very good experience with this webinar. Thank you so much for joining today. I see you around, stay in touch, and I wish you a wonderful week. See you soon, and take care. Bye-bye.
Oh, and one more thing. Apparently YouTube says you're gonna love watching this video right here. I think you should watch it.